Hey, good morning. Welcome to Alfresco Office Hours. My name is Kristen Gastaldo. I am your Alfresco Community Manager. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, Office Hours is a monthly session that we host where you get to chat with the people that make the Alfresco products or manage the Alfresco projects. Today we're doing things a little bit differently. Typically these events have been really focused on ECM, but today we have decided to talk about BPM, specifically activity. We're actually going to try to start varying some of the content of these events to focus on BPM, app dev framework, as well as ECM as usual, and we'll just increase the frequency of events if we feel like one area needs a little more coverage than before. So I do have a couple announcements to make. Our next Tech Talk Live, which is another monthly event that we host where we do more of a technical demo around a specific functionality. Our next Tech Talk Live is going to be on December 7th, and that is going to be hosted by Mario, who is one of our developers, or the lead developer for the application development framework. So you should join that. That'll be at 10 o'clock Eastern time, same as our period right now. And our next office hours is going to be on Friday, December 16th. And this is kind of a special office hours. The next Tech Talk Live that we host is actually Tech Talk Live number 100. So what we would like to do at our next office hours is to kind of celebrate that achievement and go over some of the history of Tech Talk Live, some of our favorite episodes, and we'll be joined by some of our former hosts and former employees, which will be a good time. So moving on to today, we are joined by John Sotiropoulos, who is the VP of Applications and Engineering, and we're also joined by Doug Johnson, who is our Director of Product Management. And they are going to kind of kick us off and get this activity conversation started. I'll be monitoring questions on the YouTube chat, so you should see it over just in the top right-hand side of your screen. If you have trouble using that functionality, I'll also be checking the IRC chat channel, which you can access from the Alfresco community. All right, Doug, so it's over to you.
Great. Thanks so much, Kristen. I really appreciate everyone joining today. And we have a very special guest here today. As John Sotiropoulos and I were talking about this event, we were looking at John Newton's post and kind of thinking we really wanted to get in front of the community here and have a chance to have just a chat and share some things. And we were talking to John Newton, and he was gracious enough to join us today. So I thought it may be a great place to start, John, if I can, is just really, we wanted to kind of maybe just talk through a little bit about your recent post about activity, and I thought it might be interesting to kind of just hear some of your thoughts around that area.
Okay, I think you're going to have to mute well because we're in the same room. Don't want double echo here. Okay. Yeah, so there's clearly been some changes that have happened in the last few months as far as activity is concerned. And to a certain extent, I think it's just a matter of upward and onward. For us, I think it's a real opportunity to actually become more open in the process in which we build activity as a business process management engine. I think over time, I think what we've been trying to do with activity is build an engine that solves a lot of business process problems, and as well as solving our own problems for Alfresco to be able to build workflows, to do business processes around content. And over time, it was absolutely clear that there's an appetite to do far more than that. But I think more recently, in the last few years, the biggest opportunity of them all is the transformation of business, and businesses becoming more digital businesses in which they build digital platforms to engage their customers and also their employees, that they're building out new capabilities of making their businesses far more effective. And so I think it's an opportunity to rethink what is business process management in the 21st century. You know, not really handle the same old problems that we did before in the same old way. Likewise, there's a lot of intelligence that's being built in a lot of different systems. And you know, whether it's machine learning, artificial intelligence, new rules capabilities. And I think it's beyond the capabilities of one single project to do everything themselves. There's a lot of ecosystems that are forming between open source projects. So I think as innovation starts to build in business process management, as well as open source in general, I think we really need to be more open and more collaborative as well. We certainly want to take into account the feedback from the community more and be more engaging with the community. We took what was a very different business model for Activiti right from the very beginning. And it's actually the reason that Activiti exists, is to have an open license, an Apache license, where you can really do anything you want with it. It's there to be used in any type of application in any way that you want. And we have a lot of customers that really want to embed it and use some really fantastic things, whether it's banks, redesigning the whole financial chain and the way transactions are handled, or whether it's the Internet of Things and how those things communicate with the with the central corporation to be able to become more intelligent things and to be able to react to their environments. So we can only take on those opportunities by making this bigger, more open, more experimental as well, and more adaptable to what's going on. So I'm really looking forward to a new future with Activiti that is more open, that's more focused on users and how users use software, to a whole new world of responsive applications, mobile first, API first development, and new cooperation with other open source projects as well. So looking forward to your engagement, and also looking forward to any questions you might have toward the end of this session here.
And just to add a little bit to that, John, I think you put it very nicely about the openness and how, you know, in the complexity of the world that we have today, you cannot do everything yourself. We also need to make sure that we have a governance in place that supports us to do that. So one of the things I think they have happened in this space with previous forks, with this fork, is it tends to be around individuals and around personalities. And I think we need to move a little bit beyond that. So one of the things that we want to do is to have a very well-defined governance model. There are various ideas that we're playing with, whether it's a steering group, whether it's a foundation, and we want to consult the community. We want to hear from you guys what you think about. But whatever we choose, we really want to achieve a couple of things. One is that's transparent and everyone knows how decisions are made, and B, everyone has a voice. And so that, yes, I think will give us that innovation, that it isn't just, you know, a couple of people doing things.
Yeah, and you know, I think the approach that we've taken is a set of principles in terms of how do we build this and how do we engage. I think we have had and will have a real opportunity to define participation and collaboration and contribution to the open source community. And it's in our interest to make that as open as possible. And Activiti will lead the way in terms of how that process will work. As far as governance is concerned, you're absolutely right. You know, it's got to be a more open and transparent process as well. And even things like what is enterprise and what is community will be absolutely clear and will be not arbitrary, but be principle-based in terms of allowing the community to be able to innovate, to be able to use it, and for us to be able to make the money that will help it continue to grow. I think I've said in the past, you know, we've invested over $7 million in the Activiti project. And there's clearly a demand to do more with it. And it's in a unique opportunity right now as part of that digital transformation, as well as an architectural revolution around not just cloud, but also things like microservice architectures as well. You know, and that will, in some ways, I believe, help the whole governance process as well. You know, to have clearer boundaries, to have clearer lines of responsibility, and more accountability as well to the community. I'm sure you'll be talking about some of the mechanisms that we'll be putting into place.
Absolutely. Well, one of the things I know as we've talked, and certainly one thing that I've observed is as a key thing is what we're doing here today, which is communication. Obviously, we have a lot of formal structures set up, our forums that we have. We, of course, are very open in GitHub and other kind of developer spaces. But I think communication more regularly is something that I think as I've kind of assessed kind of the last few months here, within Activiti, that's one thing that I think could be improved. Are there other things that we think we might have learned and that we want to kind of do different in the future? I think we talked about communication right now in terms of frequency and form, and we'll come back to that in a minute because I did want to talk to some things that we're going to be doing on behalf of the community in terms of the forums area. But are there other things that either John, you might kind of think of? I know we talk about community being really not personality driven, but driven by that need for innovation and having a process that kind of governs that, and that we kind of where our shared values can come together. Any other kind of observations that you can think of in terms of kind of some of the recent events that we might want to share, lessons learned, if you will?
Well, I can start off by saying, I'll reiterate the opportunity to collaborate with other open source projects and with the community more, because there's many sources of good ideas that are out there, and we certainly don't want to reinvent things that may already exist elsewhere. The other thing that I would think as well is just the role that the software is playing is actually in some really mission critical areas, and that just enterprise standards will just become more and more important, whether it's the reliability, availability, serviceability, but also things like security as well are going to be really important in that. And also, I think, learning what makes sense in terms of what makes sense for enterprise and not, I think it's going to be principle based.
Yeah.
So John, any ideas?
Yeah, I think you mentioned security there. That's a very good example where you don't have to wait for an enterprise edition to have reliability and security in place. The world has changed. So one of the things that we're doing, you've seen 522 came a couple of weeks ago. We're planning the next community release, and it focuses on extensibility so that you can have an event listener to send your data to different reporting engines, so that capabilities that we have on the enterprise product, we want to see them in the open source project. And we're also doing some of pen tests, because we want to bring that reliability and security into the community product. So although it's open source, it doesn't mean that you cannot use it for serious work. And we want people actually to help us that with use cases of how they use the community. In terms of moving forward, we're also have a version 6 coming up. Obviously, in terms of roadmap and in terms of where we're taking the community edition, we already have made commitments around the version 6 engine, the work that started before with pluggable persistent stores. So we're working on bringing Cassandra, and we're working with some other people that they want to bring in providers for other NoSQL products. Also, ad hoc processes, that's something that we want to invest more and more. That's, again, we want to bring that around the Christmas timeline. It's an early Christmas present, if you like, to the community. And above all, take some of the things, the user experience, for instance. Again, just because it's an open source product, it doesn't have to look childish. So some of the things that we want to do is bring, as John said, mobile responsive into the version 6 UI. And once we've got the version 6 project out, pay more attention, pay more attention to process mining. We're taking initiatives with universities using BPM academies to bring in analytics, machine learning into BPM. And those are ideas that, this is an opportunity for us to reboot, if you like, Activiti. So those are the starting points we had, and we're carrying on. But giving this open model, we want to hear from people more innovative ideas to bring in.
Mm-hmm. And I know as I've talked to some community members in various formats, I know I've kind of heard that the pluggable persistence is something that's really exciting to people in terms of kind of meeting some of the challenges that they're seeing in their process applications and how they're building them out for scale. And also, I think, John, in addition to kind of the user experience, I know that mobility and really making sure that how we bring those experiences when you're designing your forms along with your process and such, that they really fit into that kind of responsive nature that many end users, of course, in many different applications really are just requiring today. So I know that's a key area that we're really looking at. And of course, we want to hear what are the key focus points that are important to the community itself. So within this, are there, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, you're going to have to say John S. or John N.
Yes, I will.
We get a bit confused.
Yeah, we were talking about with another Doug in here, we were going to have to call you DJ.
That's right, and that's just fine. And at least my name isn't John for today's purposes. That's a little confusing.
Yeah.
Well, great.
Okay, I think we should also, recognize that, that the code has been forked, and we've had some of our friends move on to do other things. But I don't think that in any way diminishes our interest in activity. In fact, I think what's really important is that there be a goal and purpose to activity. And for us, it's really about the major transformations that are going on in software right now and in business as well, with digital transformation, driving a lot of new initiatives. And what we know is that information management, content management, process management will be absolutely critical to that transformation. And it's a real opportunity. And there's nothing that's really going to slow us down toward that direction. If anything, we are dramatically increasing our investment in activity.
And I think also, John, just to add to that, I think it's a good opportunity when a major change happens to actually pause and use that as an opportunity to reinvent BPM. Some of the things that we said about security, about user experience, about mobile first, it's effectively taking activity to the next stage. And we're bringing, it's not just us, we have many other people that in conversations and organizations with us. We'll give an update in a follow-up session on that. They're very interested in joining us on that journey. So I think, yes, of course, things have changed, but we're continuing to push BPM as hard or even harder than before.
Excellent. Well, while I thought now might just be an interesting time to just highlight some of those areas where some of the things that we are doing for the community and places that we might have an opportunity to share in new ways. So one of the things I thought I would go ahead and announce now is that we are looking to upgrade our forms infrastructure that we're doing with that. So there is a new platform that we've successfully used in some of the other communities here at Alfresco, and we've had such great success with that. We want to bring that to the activity community. So the great news is all of the great content that we have on our forums will transfer over to the new system, and it will bring us a lot of new capabilities in terms of that. Kristen, I know you've worked with that capability. Do you want to take a moment and just kind of share some of the benefits that community members will receive from the platform?
Sure, absolutely. I do manage the current Alfresco community, which right now focuses on ECM and the app dev platform. We are ready and preparing the space to migrate over the activity forums and use the Jive platform for that as well. It's a great platform. It has a lot of great functionality. Besides the fact that it will get rid of any spam issues that we've had, I know that that's always something that's plagued those the Drupal forums. So moving on from that, you won't have to worry about that bit. But the thing that's really nice about Jive is that it provides a place to put all types of content within one search. So you can ask a question, it will search our blogs, our Q&A, our discussion, our documents that live in the space. And so you can have hopefully a much quicker time to find the answers that you need. It's really easy to tell what content is out of date. It's really easy to tell which questions have officially approved answers so that you don't spend a lot of time perusing conversations to find your answer. It's quite easy to join. It's quite easy to connect with other people. You can look for other members who specialize in the same areas you do, write in the same code that you do, live in the same area you do, and then you can connect with those folks directly in the platform. It has a lot of good collaboration tools, so that if you want to create a document or work on a project with another community member, you have the ability to edit documents together. So you don't have to have things like in your Google Drive, sharing things that way. You can have everything live in the community space and be public, be forward facing. It also has something that we haven't really discussed as far as our full usage of it yet, but when you guys speak about getting feedback, Jive has true ideation. So you have the ability to submit an idea, vote on those ideas, provide your feedback to a specific area of the product. We also have the ability to create like a forward-facing roadmap so that you guys could see what we're working on, when we're working on it, and provide contributions based on what we're already working on, so it makes it easier for us all to work together. So I can send out a link. I'll actually put that in the, I'll put it in the YouTube information at the bottom so you guys can join the community. You don't have to join to peruse, so you're more than welcome to just come and check out the space and then join whenever there's content there that interests you. You do have to join to participate. So if you want to follow things or like things or be notified when we do launch that new BPM space, it's good to go ahead and sign up. And our tentative deadline for launching that space is within this year. By the end of the year, we'd like to get everything moved from the forums into Jive and live.
Excellent. And so those will be some new tools that we'll be able to use to get feedback and really have this kind of participation like we're talking about here today. So I thought that might just make sense to kind of go ahead and announce that. In addition to that, the activity.org site that we know and love will also be receiving a good uplift in terms of kind of its look and feel. And so that'll be a good thing as well. So great. John Sotiropoulos or John Newton, were there any other things that you wanted to cover before maybe we kind of open it up for other Q&A topics?
I think we've covered, most of that. We're bringing new, we're bringing resources, we're bringing openness, we're bringing new ideas. So it's activity, I think, will flourish.
Yeah, and I guess one thing that Kristen mentioned that will be related to governance is just ideation being a core part of the decision-making process and more openness in that process. Having the tools available that actually make it easier to make collaborative decisions, I think will be very important in this.
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to that. So,
and being transparent and accountable and all those kind of things.
Yeah.
Well, great. Kristen, I guess unless we had any other kind of things that we wanted to go through, are there some questions that you might see from kind of some of the various forums? I know we had some questions that came through on the forums themselves. However you want to kind of go at it. I guess this is just an open forum here.
Well, I think we had some kind of large questions asked on the forum, so I'll get to those in just a second. There's one from the IRC chat where they're asking, is there a plan to allow the projects that are made on Activiti to integrate with GitHub? Online collaboration is good, but as a dev team, it'd be nice to have some Git integration.
Yep, agreed, and that's something that's as part of enhancing the application development experience and the team collaboration. That's something that we're planning to bring in a post version 6 release. And again, when we open up that on the ideation board, we'll put it there. Obviously, there will be other candidates too, but it will be interesting to see how people vote for that feature.
Perfect. Thanks for that. And I don't want to derail us too far off the Activiti conversation, but a lot of the IRC folks are our Alfresco users, and so they did ask, are there plans for this governance model that we're using for Activiti to bleed into the Alfresco governance model? It's the feeling essentially is that Activiti feels a bit more open than Alfresco at this point in time. So I don't want to take us too far off Activiti, but if any of you guys can address the governance between those two products.
Yeah, so I'll go ahead and take that. I think probably the thing that has hindered more collaboration and cooperation within the alfresco community is the contribution model. And I think that Activiti can become a more of a model for how we can do contribution. In a lot of ways, the legal process has held things up in terms of having a simple contribution license and process that didn't impinge on some of the rights of the people contributing. It's quite clear that Apache license makes things a lot easier for contributions for anybody to do whatever they want with, as appropriate and within the rules of the Apache license to be able to contribute. But also, this collaborative approach with the new tools may point to a way in which we can streamline contributions into the Alfresco platform as well. What you will see is tighter and closer collaboration between the Activiti development teams and the Alfresco development teams, and actually also the new application development frameworks as well, as a overarching bridge between the two different sets of services. As I mentioned in my blog, we'd like to see each project kind of flourish independently, to be able to work independently, but to also interoperate as well. And with that closer collaboration, I'm hopeful that it will make it easier to take what we learn from Activiti and actually apply it to the Alfresco development process. It may be hard to believe, but I have been a proponent of more openness in Alfresco in terms of development and accepting contributions outside of the core development teams. We do have a responsibility to our customers to ensure the quality of the software going into the core of Alfresco, but that doesn't mean that it has to come exclusively from our development team. So I'd say let's watch how Activiti flourishes under this new model, and let's take the successes and apply it to Alfresco.
And again, just to add, we added that to the application development framework. So we as Alfresco believe in that openness and contribution. But as John said, there are some challenges around Alfresco. And I think, as we progress and as we simplify and collaborate, I think we'll influence each other, and you'll see more of that model in Alfresco too, in Alfresco 1 as well.
I think that's a good segue into one of the forum questions where it was just asked, is Activiti becoming part of ECM?
No.
Yeah.
That's definitely the short answer for sure. Someone want to add to that?
You wouldn't have to call BPM guys like me and Dagby on this call if that was the case.
I would like to enhance that as well. I mean, it's kind of an interesting question, because I've kind of heard people ask the question of, are they coming together? Are they separate? As John Newton clearly said, it's its own project. We have our own set of capabilities in terms of that, and really our own missions around process-driven applications. Now, the fact of the matter is, all processes deal with some form of content. There might be some very unique cases where all you really are looking for is a state engine, but that's very rare. 99.9% of all business process management really deals with content, whether it be in the form of collecting information from user forms and passing that to another system, or, of course, in the case of what we offer is ever deeper integration into various forms of content services. So there absolutely is a collaboration between content and process, but certainly they fit into their own set of capabilities, just in the same way that various innovations and scalability and different database technologies and so on are coming together to add value. So it's really coming together there. I think the uniqueness, and certainly this is separate, BPM and ECM, but where they're coming together in terms of some of the problems that they're trying to solve is the levels of engagement that they can have with the actual collaborators with the process and the content. So they're definitely separate, but that's that place where they share. And there have been other office hours and other times where we've shared more about our application development framework. But that provides kind of a backbone that kind of glues things together in terms of those user experiences. At least that's my kind of view on that. I don't know if anyone had anything to add to that.
Well, if you take some of the use cases, case management is a perfect example where the two cannot live completely independently from each other. Context comes from the process, and content itself can provide context for the process itself. In fact, actually drive outcomes in the process. So to suggest that they can always live independently doesn't make any sense at all. But likewise, I don't want Activiti to be an anchor to Alfresco, and I don't want Alfresco to be an anchor to Activiti. Both should evolve at what I've described as the speed of open source, which is much faster than our proprietary competition. So, let them flow at the rate that it makes sense, and where they intersect, which might be in some of the applications, let's make sure that we meet the requirements of those applications. Let's have very open and direct dialogues with everybody involved and make sure that there's interoperability. The diagram that I've had is that I sort of visualize process enveloping content and process driving content. That yes, process can live by itself. It can interact with databases. It could interact with other sources of content, such as Box and Google Docs, Dropbox, as well as other content management systems like Documentum, OpenText, or FileNet. And yeah, that's great for us in general. But if we're not aware of the events that come out of a content management system, if we're not aware of the models that exist inside of content management, and if the content management system is not aware of the business processes that are actively moving the content, I think we're missing a real opportunity to have more effective applications. Likewise, we're missing out on a lot of the insights that can be gained by looking at analytics from both the content and the process to actually understand what's going on with the business, the digital business. And you don't get those in isolation between those two things. So let's try and find where there's common ground and use common tools, and that will help integrate those things. But it should not hinder either project.
And I think some of the stuff you said, John, about microservices earlier on, all the conversations we had, as we make this a more open project, we want to make it more modular and more microservices based. And so BPM in itself, can have relationships to content, can have relationships to machine learning, rules, dynamism, and we're just making it really, if you like, the orchestration platform for different types of capabilities, content being one of them. And the same goes, on the ECM side of things. So again, separate, but very open and very interoperable with each other.
So we do have a question around, even though they're separate, is there going to be some sort of, for lack of a better word, better integration between embedding of BPM into ECM? A lot of people don't want to buy ECM, buy BPM, run two full different things. Is there going to be an integration, or are there any changes down the line for integrations between the two or people using both?
Yes, so some of the features that we're bringing out in version 6, the enhanced version 6 that we have, is the ability to look at ECM as if it was a data source, so that you can orchestrate it. We're making it easier to integrate the BPM version into Alfresco 1. And we're also even talking about how do we bring in a message-based interface so that the two systems can, a queuing system, where, for instance, for analytics, If you have Activiti on its own, you can carry on using what you have in Activiti, but if you have it with Alfresco one, you can actually combine the events, combine the intelligence by using a configurable queuing system. And in fact, preview of that will be our next release for the community edition of the Activiti engine, and we'll blog about that and explain how that actually signifies that convergence via open standards amongst the two.
So speaking of the next release, that's another question. Is there a place currently where people can see the activity roadmap and see, what we're working on, as well as submit contributions? Where does that live currently?
At the moment, you can find out about scheduled releases on the GitHub project, but this is where we're changing with the ideation board, where we want to bring under one visible. Sometimes it's very hard to find out what's happening in GitHub. So that's why we want to have this ideation board where the roadmap is very explicit, very open, and also you can see why we got there. What's the rationale behind it, and what was the community's response to that. So that's why we will have the roadmap in the ideation board.
Perfect. I do have a question from the IRC chat in regards to Flowable. Will there be continued support for Flowable inside Alfresco, or as a replacement, are we going to use any kind of enforcer plugins? Where do we stand with that?
I'm not sure I fully understand the question. So Flowable is a fork. It will follow its own direction.
If people are using Flowable with Alfresco, I suppose is the question.
Well, I think Alfresco will carry on using Activiti. Whether Flowable wants to use Alfresco, that's really for it's how they decide to integrate with content. John or Doug, I don't know if I'm not sure I completely understood the question. If you want to add to that.
Yeah, I don't know if perhaps the person who asked that question could elaborate. I guess is the question. Will Flowable be plug compatible with what Activiti does? Which I think John's answering the question. Kind of depends on Flowable. Are we going to make Activiti plug compatible with Flowable?
I think they mean Alfresco as opposed to Activiti, right? Maybe I said that incorrectly. If people are using Flowable and Alfresco, do we provide any support for those two working together, since we support Alfresco?
I think we provide support for Activiti working for Alfresco, and if there's whatever level of compatibility they want to provide as far as that's concerned, then yeah. But I don't think we're going to go out of our way to say to vet whether Flowable works with Alfresco or not. That's kind of up to those guys.
But we're not going to block people, or are we going to block people?
No, there's no reason to block them. We have a lot of customers using Pega in conjunction with Alfresco and Lombardi in conjunction with Alfresco. Why, there's no reason to block people from using any BPM engine. I think it's up to us to provide the better integration. That's all.
And I think where Activiti will shine won't be in blocking anyone out. It will be actually through its innovation and openness.
Apologies, reading a list of comments in IRC, that me a little twisted there. So that was I think you guys have answered the question.
Okay, right.
Kristen, while you're looking that up, I know looking up some things. I do know that there was one other question from the forums that I saw late last night here. It was, why should I contribute to Activiti and not one of the other BPM open source products? I think we addressed some of this earlier, but I thought that might be kind of an interesting one to kind of address head on.
Well, I would hope that we give you more of a voice in what happens next. That's our intent. We really want to open this process up more and give you more of a voice. The other thing is, I hope you buy into the vision of where we want to take this, that there's a lot of key use cases around new digital engagement and digital enterprises that we want to aim toward and to solve problems, to work very closely with our existing customers and community users, to be able to better articulate those use cases, take them away from abstract BPM and say, here's the real practical use cases for activity, and here's what we want to enable. And also, hopefully, to be able to create a community of shared components and shared capabilities, shared models that will allow various business processes to interoperate. I think what you will find is that activity will become the use case driven BPM.
Yeah, and just to add to that, really, it's taking an open source project and making it more innovative and open, really, rather than just following conversations that started years and years ago amongst individuals. And as useful they have been, it's time now to kind of reinvent BPM, to reinvent innovation within BPM.
Cool.
Yeah, we're actually slowing down a little bit on the questions in the IRC chat as well as in the YouTube.
Well, John, was there anything else that you wanted to talk about on 6.0 that may not have been covered yet that might be appropriate?
Again, 6.0, we are committing to what has agreed before. We're adding a few things there. As I said, we're adding the capabilities for NoSQL like Cassandra. But we're also bringing out that, what I mentioned, the web UI that we have for version 6, that's a little bit immature, and we want to progress it. But effectively, what we'll bring in the community with the new UI is the first open source application studio, where people can take the advantage of forms of processes and rule centers and build applications that aren't just process applications, but applications that people can access from mobile, can access from tablets. And so you will see an awful lot of investment in that area. And as I said, we have quite a few other people, other organizations interested in our ideas, and we're in conversations with them. Plus that we have been very busy recruiting new members for both the development team here, but also the community. We're in the middle of those conversations, but before the end of the year, you will see some announcements that we're bringing in quite a lot of people with experience in dynamic processes, in processes where they have runtime configurability and intelligence. So keep an eye on all that. And by joining the community, actually, you will be the first to be notified about those.
Appreciate the plug there, John. John S. We do have one other question about both Activity and Alfresco as far as community editions versus enterprise editions. Are we going to be doing any releases about performance benchmarks?
Say that again, I didn't hear you, sorry.
Well, they're going to be released performance benchmarks for Activity and Alfresco community versus enterprise editions.
That's a very good point, and that's some of the things that John talked about and myself talked about. Functionality, but adding security, adding reliability. We're starting with pen test. We're also sketching out of how to do more detailed benchmarking. So yes, we will have both for the community and the enterprise product. And we see that as not anymore as a luxury, but as a standard quality that we need to bring both for the open source and the enterprise edition. Doug, do you want to add anything to that?
No, I agree, and some of the customers we've been talking to, really the great news is their usage and adoption really have gotten much more stringent in terms of the volumes and sustained motion that they're trying to push through in terms of business processes. So I fully agree. These are some things that we're looking at, and we want to bring both the value into what we're doing in our enterprise and obviously bring some of that value back to the community.
And that's another reason, going back to the previous question about why should people contribute to Activity, because it really is the foundation where it's open source and open, but also has those ingredients that you will find in robust enterprise software, whether it's scalability, whether it's performance, whether it's security. And that will be one of the proof points of how we invest in that and the open source part of Activity.
Okay, we've got about 10 minutes left if anybody has another question they want to get in.
Well, I wanted to add something as well about the user experience, which is going to be really important as well. We got to level up on user experience. It's absolutely critical. One of the messages that Alfresco, the company, has been pushing forward is the importance of design thinking. And that's why, we're adopting material design as the design language, as part of the design paradigms and metaphors to put forward, and why we're going with Angular 2. Over time, we may find ourselves supporting many different user interface type works. We've chosen this one to be able to share some of the components. There's a wide adoption of Angular in general. We think there's going to be a big take-up of Angular 2. And it's also aligned very much with what enterprises and system integrators are doing today, as well as ISVs, in terms of the types of applications they're doing. But in today, user experience is so important that we just want to have not just our own tools be part of design process, but to also recognize that business process management is as much about user interaction, user design, as it is about process design, the mechanics of business process management. Yes, scalability is very important, but for a lot of applications, it's not the most important thing. And I think for virtually any people-centric business process, usability is probably one of the #1 things that's most important. So, we will have design tools be part of this whole process of making activity successful, as well as design methodologies as well will be an important aspect to the whole thing. So, I just want to emphasize that we're not just looking at a process engine. We're looking at BPM as a whole. And that's why, some going beyond BPMN is really important as well. It's there's more to process definition than BPMN.
And John, it's good that you mentioned user experience and design. So our first step towards that in the version 6 UI that you will see, this mini app studio that allows you to start with what the business wants and design your process and your interface and how to measure that. In fact, we're investing heavily on usability, and it's good to know that our head of experience design, Lisa Timon, is leading that effort. She comes from Apple and Yahoo. So one of the main benefits that you will see in the community version is that investment that we're doing in usability and using those technologies that John mentioned, the Angular 2 and material design.
Okay, we do have one other question that has come in from the IRC chat. And there's some history here I don't know, so I'm going to ask. Since activity is going to be tied mostly alongside Alfresco, why should anyone else contribute? There's some reference to it happened before with Spring Source, and it didn't work so well with the community except for people who developed for Alfresco.
Sorry, I'm not sure I get the reference to Spring Source.
Actually, it says Spring Surf. That's I don't know if that's a typo in there. And this is a history I don't know about, so perhaps I've missed that.
Yeah. So okay, Surf, Spring Surf. Surf was a user interface framework that was designed. It was designed for more than share. It actually was designed originally to help create websites when we were doing more web content management. We had the intention of giving it to Spring Source as an additional project and put it in there. And we did not invest in community. We did not invest enough in engaging the community. We were just kind of hoping that by putting it out there, it was solving a problem that others didn't solve. But it takes a lot to be able to build up the community. I think with Activiti, there's already a much bigger community. There's a lot more history and engagement than there was with SURF. And so I think, you know, the process that Activiti's gone to in terms of accepting contributions in the past, how the community was managed in the past, how innovation was managed in the past is going to change. This is a fundamental step change in doing that. There's now new people involved in this process. So, you know, judge us on our deeds, not on our words. Let's see how it goes and see how it's different than it has been in the past. But in terms of comparing it to other communities that are out there, in terms of the core, in terms of additions and extensions, I think we're putting into effect the tools and mechanisms to make it possible to do it. Now, judge us on our actions, and we'll be transparent about them as well.
Yeah, and John, I'm glad you mentioned that there is already a community, because as we're, you know, even as we were talking, people are contributing. So there is a community already there contributing to Activiti. It's just us taking it to the next level where it deserves to be. And John is right. You know, we'll be judged by actions really rather than the promises. And I think it will be great to have a conversation with the community at the regular intervals so that we're also accountable on our promises.
And to that end, I did want to mention one thing that we will be following up here in the early December timeframe. We did want to put together a survey around this governance that we've been talking about. So we will see, you'll see that posted in the forums, and you'll have a chance to give your direct feedback, both in kind of some questions we'll put together, but then also some open areas where you can, we can collect that written feedback in terms of how we want to look at this new governance model and really be more open in terms of this. So be watching that in terms of on the forums. As I said, that will be launched in early December, and we'll probably have like a 15-day window where we'll take some feedback on that, just to kind of have some motivation there to get that feedback as we really plan that 2017 efforts that we have around even being more open and continuing some of the transparency that we have here today. I just want to kind of note that there. Kristen, I don't know if we have time for another question or not.
We're actually caught up in the space, so that's good. We've timed it pretty well. So I would say from here, what people can do is continue to join and participate in the current Activiti forums if you have questions or want to connect with our team or with each other. But know that we will be migrating that space, the forum portion at least, over to the Jive community within the next month or so. You can go ahead and join the community. There's a smooth transition of your profile, so you won't lose any content if you join now and if you're migrated in later. And then if they have questions about the project or want to know where we stand currently, they can check out the GitHub area. Did I miss anything?
See you in December when we'll have much more to share.
Perfect. And we'll be posting those events both in the forums and on the new community platform just for the overlap with folks.
Great.
Okay, guys. Well, again, we'll be doing Tech Talk Live December 8th and the next office hours on Tech Talk Live December 7th, the next office hours on the 16th. And all this is posted in the community. If you have any questions, you can find me there or you can find me on Skype. It's just Kristen.Gastaldo. And thanks for joining us.
Okay. Thank you all.
Bye.